Lesson 34, the Bureaucracy, Part 2. In Lesson 33, we covered the federal bureaucracy, shaped like a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid is the Executive Office of the President. That includes the White House Office, Office of Management and Budget, Council of Economic Advisors, National Security Council, and a host of other offices contained within the EOP. The Executive Office of the Presidency includes the President's top staffers, personal staff. They work in the West Wing, the East Wing in the Eisenhower or Executive Office building across the street from the White House. And in the West Wing is the Oval Office of the President, and his top staffers have offices there as well. Then below the Executive Office of the President is the 15 executive departments of the federal government, the heads of which form the cabinet. We'll be going to those 15 executive departments in just a moment and taking a look at the current cabinet of President Trump. And then not associated or not underneath the 15 executive departments. Remember, bureaucracy is government by department or bureau, or 90 independent agencies. And in part one, we covered the role and function of some of those independent agencies. Continuing with the federal bureaucracy, where we left off, in all but a few cases, applicants for jobs in the federal government must be U.S. citizens. The term we use to describe federal government jobs is the civil service. These are civil service employees. Remember, the federal government is by far, the executive branch, by far the largest of the three branches of government. And most of the employees who work for the federal government work outside of Washington, D.C. 9 out of 10 work outside of Washington. And we talked about the different types of jobs that are available in Lesson 33. So again, you got to be a U.S. citizen. Also, applicants who are veterans of military service have preference. They have preferred status over other candidates with equal qualifications. So veterans have preference in applying for these civil service jobs. There you go, civil service. The civil service system are the thousands and thousands of federal government employees. Again, federal government, not state nor local, but federal government employees make up the civil service system. Political appointees, chosen by the president to fill the top jobs based upon their ability and because they help him get elected. Employment ends when the president leaves office. We call these political appointees part of the president's administration. The president brings in these people to help him administer and run the federal government. And when the president leaves, these people leave as well. And the next president brings in his people in these political appointments. Classic example of a political appointment was former FEMA Director Michael Brown. This was under George W. Bush, the 43rd President of the United States. Michael Brown. He helped get George W. Bush elected. In turn, he was rewarded with a job in the federal government, working as the head of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Brownie, as he was called by George W. Bush, had no emergency management experience before joining FEMA. In fact, it was revealed by the media that Brown had previously spent 11 years overseeing horse trial judges for the Arabian Horse Association, and that the association had asked him to resign. That's an example of spoils, or the spoils system, giving out government jobs as rewards for loyalty or personal favors, regardless of ability. If you remember your American history, it was Andrew Jackson who kind of started the spoils system by bringing in his friends and supporters to help him run the government. We call that the spoils system. Now, the civil service system is not the spoils system. I want to stress that. Okay, the Pendleton Act in the 20th century limited the number of jobs the president could give to political appointees. There's a limit. The civil service system hires government workers based on open and competitive examinations and merit. It's administered by the Office of Personnel Management, the OPM, which, by the way, is a part of the EOP, the Executive Office of the President. So, in order to get a job in the federal government, to work in the civil service system, and by the way, civil service employees have permanent jobs from one administration to the next. Their jobs do not depend upon who is elected president, who serves as president. They continue their jobs regardless. In contrast to the political appointments, civil service workers are 90%. 90% of government employees have permanent jobs, as opposed to those who are political appointments that come in with the president and then leave with the president. Okay, just a little bit about, before we get to the cabinet, the vice president and the first lady. Most presidents delegate very little authority to their VPs. Exceptions would be Al Gore. Bill Clinton used Gore quite extensively, and George W. Bush used Richard Cheney. Gave him a big role as well. And so remember, the only constitutional role for the vice president is to be the president of the Senate and to vote in the Senate if in case of a tie, the president of the Senate. But most of the time, the role of the vice president depends upon the president and what the president wants the vice president to do. Many times they send VPs on visits to foreign nations as representatives of their administration. They may attend funerals representing the United States of foreign leaders. In terms of first ladies, Eleanor Roosevelt was really the first lady who had an active role. Before Roosevelt, first ladies were not involved in policy, but Roosevelt, Eleanor, worked tirelessly for the young and the disadvantaged. Nancy Reagan, recent first lady, spoke out against drug abuse. She had the Just Say No campaign in the 1980s, Nancy Reagan. And usually what happens is the first lady will adopt a theme or a project or topical issue to take the lead on that issue. So Nancy Reagan's case was speaking out against drug abuse. Hillary Clinton, when she was First Lady for Bill Clinton, worked to improve health care back in the 1990s. Very much involved in the CHIP program, the Children's Health Insurance Program that came out of the Clinton effort to try to get to universal coverage. Their attempts in the 1990s at universal health care failed, but Hillary Clinton, as First Lady, took upon that responsibility and was very much involved in the CHIP program. Laura Bush promoted education and reading. This is George W. Bush's wife, First Lady. Education and reading was her issue. Probably remember that Michelle Obama led the fight against childhood obesity, eating good foods in the schools, exercising, proper nutrition. Melania Trump is taking on internet bullying as her issue. So this is what the first ladies do. Some are more visible, more active than others. And again, this all depends upon the president and how he wants his first lady to play that role. Okay, that concludes part 2. Lesson 34. Lesson 35 is going to be on the cabinet.